Hello and welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Renovators, the business advisory show for real estate professionals. My name's Chanell and this is Rex.
How are you, Chanell?
I'm good, Rexy. I'm excited about today's guest.
Why are you so excited?
I think that the real estate industry has a very robotic way of marketing, to put it lightly. I think that if I see another agent's face on a bus or a very, robotic TikTok video, I might lose.
What about the sold side?
The sold side.
And the butt hanging out.
Yeah.
Very common.
It's a very colourful industry, the real estate industry, and marketing is a huge part of the success of agents, particularly with personal branding. So the reason I'm so excited about today's guest, Rex, is that we've got someone that specialises in personal branding and marketing out of the real estate industry to really talk about personal branding, the importance of personal branding, and marketing in general in an industry that is relatively saturated when it comes to marketing. On top of that, I really want to delve into her personal story, how she created a personal brand, and I think it's going to be really beneficial to our audience.
I can't wait.
Would you like to introduce her, Rexy?
Without further ado,
I think it's
Mel Yu. Welcome.
Welcome, yay, thanks for having me.
How are you, Mel?
I'm good, thank you.
Like we haven't been, Melissa and I shared co-hosting on a different show at one stage.
We did, we've crossed paths a few things and many things, but here we are, so thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Mel. You want to start, Rexy?
I'll start. Let us start with your story, because you've got such a fascinating personal story as well. Would you like to share with?
How long do we have? Yeah, I would, because I do think when we talk about this conversation around personal brand, context is actually everything. And so if I come out and I just speak as an expert in branding, it doesn't actually tie in why I'm an expert in branding. So the context is actually incredibly important, and not so much for those out there listening that my story is the influential thing. It's mainly you taking away what out of your own lived experience makes your personal brand powerful. So my name is Mel. I have a personal branding, creative branding agency called Run It Up Media here in Melbourne, but we service nationwide and in all industries. But my story started as a Chinese immigrant. I am Chinese Australian, and my parents migrated here in their 20s and basically plopped us along in a small town called Patterson Lakes. And for those that don't know where Patterson Lakes kind of is, I call it like the Summer Bay of Australia. And it's palm trees, it's lots of like lake views, it's all quite man-made. But back in the 90s where I grew up, we were one of the only Chinese families within a very Western dominated world. And I share that really early story purely because as a kid, I think we always try to blend in, and we as you go through school, you want to really just be part of the crowd and belong. Yet based on simply the color of my skin, I just always stood out. It was always oh, Mel, the Yus, they're the Asian family within the community. And I really hated that when I grew up. But now with hindsight, just recognizing that I was always born to stand out, and now being in the personal brand space, recognizing that the things that make you stand out are actually leverage and are actually really, really powerful. And so growing up, my parents divorced when I was very young, and I was fascinated about psychology. So I studied psychology in high school and was super academic. Again, when I look back, I'm why did I study psychology? I loved relationships. I was always just fascinated by people, what their story is. When I would catch a train, I'm always looking and making up stories about where people are going or what they do for work. And so I really loved and leaned into psychology. And then coming out of that, I fell in love. 18 years old, fresh, the world was my oyster, and it was in between sort of finishing high school and then going to uni that I was boarding a late night train in Carrum on the way to the city to party in King Street. And
King Street.
It's giving a bit of context. But no, we were just, I feel at those years when you were 18, you'd drink, you'd party, you'd have friends and all of that. So we got on a train and this whole train was empty. And there was just this one boy sitting out on the carriage, and he had his head tilted against the train window. And I, being my quite confident self, was he's actually kind of good looking. And so I walked up to him, and he had a hip top phone at the time. And on the back of the phone, it said GUS. And I just read Gus. I'm hi Gus, my name's Mel. And that was like the beginning of everything. And I asked him to help me open my cruiser bottle. And he happily obliged, but we both knew it was a twist top. But that was kind of the start of my journey of falling in love. And so for the better of 6 years, we kind of built this amazing relationship. We took on the world, I think from 18 to sort of 23, 24. Again, I say it's that rite of passage because it's all about self-discovery, from going from a young adult to an adult. And just to obviously skip through a few things to get to where my journey comes in. Angus ended up taking his life in 2014 in January. So we probably need to do like a trigger warning on this episode, just to obviously preface. But I had found him, and there was always this underlying mental health struggle that Angus had gone through. But what I really found was when suicide happens, it's because people don't even want to be themselves and they choose to take their life. They think there's no other option, and it's all too much in a world where there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of struggles. But I wish he loved himself more than everything else, but he didn't have that self-love, and that ultimately ended up to him losing his life very, very young. But for me, that was the fork in the road of, well, what am I here for? Why am I here? Why did this happen? And I did a lot of deep reflection and self-reflection. And how I've kind of ended up in, I think, branding is because that is what branding really at the core is. Who are you? What do you stand for? What are your values? And well, what gets you out of bed every day? And so when we talk about personal branding, I've kind of then evolved into this incredible career. I ended up advocating and heroing mental health, being part of a lot of suicide research and just advocating a lot in that space. But I didn't see it as building a brand at the time. All I saw it was that my pain became my purpose. I really, really found a mission to turn that message into something and turn that tragedy into something that could actually help a lot of people. And so now over the last 2 years, I think the word branding's come along a lot stronger. The word personal branding is almost synonymous with any entrepreneur or any person doing marketing or building their own profile. But I think we're getting branding wrong. And so why I share that context and that story is because branding is so much deeper than slapping your face on a bus or doing a TikTok trend. Branding is all about your identity and who you are in the world, but at the core, what your values are, so that then people can see what makes you different to that other real estate agent or that other person within your field. You opened saying that the market's quite saturated, but my lens is, if you understand your personal brand and your uniqueness, it's really not that saturated at all, because there's only ever going to be one of you.
It makes complete sense. And firstly, Mel, thank you so much for sharing a really very vulnerable story. I don't know about you, Rex. I have goosebumps all over my
Rex
body.
has heard my story before.
But I still gives me goosebumps every time.
Yeah.
I think that if you follow you on social media, a lot of people have heard your story, but hearing you speak about it in person and so openly there's so much that it's so inspiring to see that there's been a lesson and something that you've learned, and you've taken it and you've created something absolutely exceptional from something that was really absolutely horrific. And I'm sure people tell you daily, but you should be so incredibly proud of yourself. I want to start on personal branding, Mel. If we had, say, an agent watching this right now and they're thinking, okay, well, I have a story, I have something to share, where do they start? Where do you start with something like this when you are, say, working for a large franchise group, potentially some restrictions on what you can or cannot share, but you want to start? Where do you start?
So I think it starts, so cliche, but it does start from within. It starts from figuring out what it is that you want to put out into the world, because the world of social media and your digital online presence should really just be a reflection of who you are in your real life. Yes, there's a strategy behind it, because we don't have to reveal everything and put all our dirty laundry out into the world. But if you kind of really figure out, well, what is the key messages that I want to put out? So if I'm a real estate agent and I want to position myself in the marketplace to be the go-to person in quote unquote a place that's super saturated, well, what makes me different? Why are people coming to me? And people often come to people because they trust people. So when you talk about building a brand, it's like, okay, well, how can I gain more and more trust from people within my community? And that requires, I think, a lot of a deep dive into who you are, like that self-reflection piece, having a look at your story. Mine was just cut into like a 4-minute story, but I can articulate it well because there's a level of process that I've done to go, okay, well, when I was this age, that happened and that made sense there. And now when I'm this age, that made sense there. And so you don't have to get as personal, and you also don't have to have a trauma story, and you don't have to have overly insane amounts of struggles or challenges, but we all do have something that makes us unique and why people will choose us over someone else. It could be as simple as your hobby is dancing or guitar, and because you show parts of that element, we're multifaceted beings. So because we show other elements of who we are, some people might naturally gravitate towards that and then happen to buy your product and service. So unpacking it rather than thinking of a transactional thing, like I'm tied into, I want to be a real estate agent and I need to sell as many things as possible. Have fun with it by showing more areas of who you are so that you're like an onion, you're continuously unpeeling and having these different personality traits within.
That makes complete
It
sense.
sounds like it's all authentic. It's all about you.
Absolutely.
It's not about an AI-generated script or dialogue. It's about you and your journey and what you are bringing to the world. And I think watching most people with personal brand, they don't necessarily do that. They kind of script and dialogue stuff from AI.
Yeah, because it's a lot easier to do that. It's a lot easier to actually just follow a trend of what already works and then slapping it on top of your own brand per se. But when you consume content, think about all the things that you've seen that's been super entertaining and yes, viral, but yet you never got any substance or depth about that person. That actually happens all the time in a world where content is everywhere, but not really deep content, or the moment when someone is actually incredibly authentic and that authenticity comes through, that's the stuff that hooks us in. That's actually the stuff that makes it stop like scrolling and makes it worthy for us to binge or read a caption or watch a full video rather than like wanting to continuously go for the swipe. So it's like, yeah, it is a lot harder to go depth and vertical rather than wide and just being like, we gotta just post content every single day. Like when it's meaningless, it can actually repel people from your brand.
And is there a method to what actually stops to attract people? Is it sound? Is it the first 2 seconds of what they're saying? Like what is it? What are the stats behind what's making people?
Yeah, so there is, in terms of like, there's 1.4 seconds is how long people have to make a judgment of your platform or of your social media.
Wow.
And when you think about that, that is insane. So if you're 1.4 seconds at the moment.
Wow.
So if you...
No wonder OnlyFans is popping off, guys.
Well, yeah,
What are they there for?
but 1.4 seconds to hook someone into a video. So yes, it does have to be eye-catching. Yes, it might have to be like a zoom effect or something that brings someone in to go, well, that was interesting, or a large call to action or something like that that shocks people. But I just think for me, I do brand really different. I really start from like a foundational level and go, what can you do that's going to be consistent and sustainable over a long period of time? Because branding compounds. Branding is long-term, marketing is short-term. Marketing often has a transaction and it drives sales, but branding builds trust, reputation, and relationships. So it's a much longer play. But if you build your brand over time, that eventually builds a much more powerful foundation compared to just going out and marketing.
Do you plan ahead? So when you're talking about consistency and you are very consistent with your branding and it's beautiful, and it's an insight into your life or what you want us to share with us. But how do you plan that ahead? How do you do that? How are you so consistent with your branding and your socials? What do you do? What is the secrets to it?
I don't have a secret because for me, it's just showing up and being myself. So I never have to wear a mask. So I think that's why my brand can come across a lot more authentic than a lot of others, because if we're too yes, you can bulk content, absolutely. Yes, you can structure and go, how do I post consistently? But you need to do something that you love and what works for you. For me, showing up on my stories or building my social profile, it comes really easy to me. I'm just that type A kind of creative person that's really loved it. And the other day someone said to me in a call going, hey, I love everything you're posting on LinkedIn. And it's like, it's interesting because your content's so refreshing because you hardly ever sell. And I didn't really realize that until someone kind of pointed it back at me going, oh, my feed's constantly of people heroing what their credibilities are and all of that. But my content hasn't had any intention to sell. It genuinely is like, here's a piece of value that this might help. More often than not, I speak in first person. I speak about a lesson that's coming up for me. That's stuff that can't be replicated with AI. So if you have a client or you have a day that it's just about documenting it rather than like creating stuff that is always so rigid.
I think it's also vulnerability to some extent as well, right, Mel? And the industry that Rex and I specialize in.
You can't be that.
There's a lot of ego. I think the biggest
Absolutely.
issue that we find is, and you know, there's not a lot of vulnerability or humility. It's like, look what I've done. I generated 14 appraisals today. I'm a $1 million GCI writer. Look at my brand new Mercedes. It's very flashy.
Yeah.
But if we look at the world that we're in today, people can see through that.
Yeah.
That materialism that we probably was consuming a lot of people, I would say pre-COVID, people now see through the, pardon my language, the bullshit radar, and they crave authenticity.
Yes.
So for our industry that we're in, that's all flashy cars and selling sunset, I personally think, but I want your professional opinion, that the authenticity and the humility is what's really going to make agents stand out amongst their peers. But what is your perception of that?
I think there's two arguments to this, and I think both can be right. So I often come from how can you be relatable and approachable? And then there'll be other experts in the branding space going, you don't want to be approachable and relatable. You almost want to be like an inspiring figure. And I think it's a dance between both. I think for people to trust you and to be an authority, you have to have a level of success that people desire. Otherwise, because if you were selling your property or you were doing law in your bedroom, home office, and there's like a single bed at the background of your content, it's not going to work, right? Like it's definitely like, oh, like that's an ick. But then where can you blend? So yes, you can have all of that success, but also what other things that you genuinely value? So like, you go for walks. Why do I know that? You've shown that on your, like, does that actually benefit anyone? No. How, like in terms of like, you love going for your walks or you have time with your partner, but what that shows, and I go for walks too, it's actually just consistency because you like exercising, you like taking care of yourself. That actually is a value that, hey, Chanell can be the person that I do property or recruitment with because she actually is consistent in other areas of her life. So you can really like have a play around with different things like that.
It's like passive marketing to some extent. And what sort of content do you think that, for example, agents or directors should be on? Do you think they should be across all platforms? Like, do you recommend TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram? Do you recommend specializing in one platform? What is your approach on where you should put your content out to?
Yeah, so I think you can definitely specialize in one platform, but having all those accounts is not going to be detrimental to you. You want to be omnipresent on omni-channels. And it's because you're not thinking about what platform best suits you. You're thinking about what platform your customer is on.
And you put the same content on all your platforms? Or
I think you have to tweak it. So I think on a first base level, if you just need to get it out there and build a foundational brand, just don't reinvent the wheel and duplicate it. But each platform has a different nuance and customer, and also like why we're going on that platform. So what I mean by that is TikTok, polished content does not work on a platform like TikTok. TikTok has to be user generated. It has to be first person. It has to almost feel like, treat it like your stories. That's what the content on TikTok really, really lands for. Instagram is a bit more of a matured platform. It was originally about pretty photos. So the curation of your reels or like your videos has a place there because it's always traditionally been about like your online business card really on Instagram. And then LinkedIn has always been a traditionally professional platform, although we're seeing changes in that where personalized content on LinkedIn really, really works. Traditionally, again, you would have your headshot, that was a corporate headshot, and that was the profile. But nowadays you see people just in their like polo t-shirts as a profile picture, and it's totally acceptable. So that platform is doing its own thing as well. CEOs are starting to show their family on there or their golf days on there, and it's actually resonating with a lot more people. However, there's still the professional executive that's on LinkedIn. And so for someone like a real estate agent, I would say you have to have LinkedIn purely from a fact that as well, it is the strongest partnership with Google. If you Google your name, 100% your LinkedIn will be one of the top 3.
Yeah, very true.
So you need to see which platforms are having really strong strategic partnerships online, and Google and LinkedIn, they're talking to each other every day. So LinkedIn is huge, but again, Instagram, most people would have an Instagram, but don't underestimate TikTok, because the virality and like how you can kind of like where it's at the moment, TikTok's like the wild, wild west. You could post once and get like 10 million views. It's insane how it's just...
TikTok frightens me.
It does.
They're really mean on there too. Whenever you always get bullied on TikTok, they're like, he needs to get another suit, haha. I'm like, oh, they're so mean on that platform. They're very rogue on that platform.
Yeah, they are. That's what I'm 100%.
Smoke my suit.
But I think if you know, it's like... But I think if you know who you are, and if you want to do something that's going to be a little bit different, so if we want to live a life that's 99% what the world can't have, you're going to have haters.
Yeah.
And I think when you build a personal brand and you step away from the status quo, you become an outlier, right? You have to mentally be okay that there are people that are not going to have any context and that are going to judge you.
Oh, yeah.
And that the noisiest place is at the bottom.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. And so I think you got to recognize that and just be like, you want a hater. Because it means you're ruffling feathers.
Yeah.
If you post something and everything's just like,
sunshine and
rainbows.
rainbows.
I'm just sitting on the fence. I don't want to offend anyone. Like, don't hurt me. Like, I would arguably say your brand's not letting anyone evoke any emotion. You want emotion. Because the same amount of people that hate.
Emotion from a post. How do you invoke emotion?
I think a really good point Mel made in our pre-Zoom chat was that the rise of AI, everyone thinks they can create content, but something that really stood out for me was that AI can't capture emotion.
Yes, not yet anyway. It is very powerful.
But how do you capture emotion? You capture emotion from your posts, and spending any time for you just evoke emotion. But how do you do that?
Yeah, I think you have to master the art of storytelling, right? And that is whether you use your voice or you use your writing. I think the most successful types of people in the world and the greats they're oracles. They either know how to speak with their words and they create really powerful speeches and influence, or they use their writing and copywriting to allow people to trust that they're the thought leader in their space. And how do you do that? You practice. You do a whole heap of, I would suggest people to go left of field and do a public speaking course, because it's going to make you grow. It's going to force you to challenge you to do something. And if you're not naturally a writer, I would go and do a spoken word class, right? You step out of what you naturally know, you'll absorb so much. I think how I've been able we work with many, many brands, right? But it means we're not industry specific, but we have to hone in on, especially personal brands. We're becoming your tone of voice and your behaviors. And for me, I go to all these different conferences. That's why I'm Real Estate Renovators, love that. Not my space, but it's where can we exchange information and education? And I love doing that. I love going to legal stuff. I love going to construction. I went to an all energy expo that's completely not even my world, because that's just who I am. I'm such a sponge. And I think the more that you travel, or the more pages of a book that you read in terms of industries, you're going to get really, really good at understanding and influencing people.
Makes complete sense. I really like that, Mel. I want to know, and again, I'm going to draw it back to something a little bit more real estate specific. What if there's an agent or someone that's really wanting to start putting content out there, but they have the fear of being cancelled? Because a lot of that's happening now. They have the fear of being judged or mocked, or the fear of, particularly in real estate, you need to relate to your first home buyer to, a deceased estate. So you need to relate to people from all ages and all walks of life. how do you create content that can potentially be across all generations without evoking too many mixed emotions or feelings or the fear of being cancelled or shut down? Is there a way?
I think the fear of being cancelled is not industry specific.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel like anyone that wants to go out and take that step, the reality is you can either sit on the sidelines and watch everyone else in the arena, or you can just get in the arena and try it for yourself and build a brand and like see what happens. One of the biggest brokers, like Jack Henderson, have you heard of him on the socials?
Yeah.
Like within a very similar space. He said he just came out and started just sharing like his buying journey, right? Or like what his money wounds were, or when he grew up. Things that you genuinely speak with an authority, you have authority if you have lived experience. So if you're always speaking from a place of authenticity and personal lived experience that, like we mentioned, can't be replicated by AI, if we were put into the same prompt on ChatGPT, guess what? You're all gonna have the same answer. But no one has like your immigrant family or like your upbringing, your siblings, where you grew up. Speak to that and without having to reveal too much, and then tie it back into who is your audience, or who is that post for? Because you can't speak on one post to the 18-year-old first homeowner, to the person that's investing a bunch of other properties, or like the one that's doing a deceased estate. But each post you can be like, this is for that person. Because if you market to everyone, you don't end up marketing to anyone, and then it doesn't land.
So I think it's really important before you even post to think, who am I talking to?
And if you're not talking to, who am I?
Both.
Because it's,
Yeah.
I think if you want to be authentic, it's about you, and you shouldn't not necessarily worry about
Well, you see a lot of this content across real estate, and we spoke about this with Mel. It's these bizarre videos that I watch them and I think, who was that for?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah.
It's
But that's just content for the sake of
for
content.
the sake of content. Is that worthwhile? You know, I've listened to very early on in my business days too much Gary Vee that was like, put it out, put anything out, as long as you're putting content out. And now when I look back at the stage that I'm at now in business and life, I think I don't really relate to that advice at all. Like, if you're going to put content out, put it out for value, right? You want your audience to you want to give something to then get back in return subliminally almost.
But if you're authentic, putting any content out, it's about you. If you're not authentic and you're just doing it for the sake of content, then it may not resonate with you tomorrow because it's not you. But if you're authentic about what you do,
You're just taking people on the journey. My content has evolved as like our mentors evolve and our journey evolves. And when you show that you can evolve, I think that's incredible. But on that, I think it is about you, but it's about also how you serve. Because otherwise it becomes egotistical content, because it can't be a me show, because then people just go, just made everyone feel shit because you're having the best life ever.
Yeah.
But if you use that concept and actually bring it back to how someone else could think bigger or dream bigger or take a risk and build a portfolio or something like that, and it's around education on how you can help someone else, I always have my audience in mind, even though it is about me and my journey. But I don't know if you are like, I'm constantly like, I don't know who this is specifically for, but if you are going through XYZ, this is for you.
Makes sense.
But you're authentic. And as you've changed, it's your journey.
Yes.
So whatever you put out, it may not be aimed at one particular person, or may not be aimed at anyone, but it's your journey. So when you follow you, it's not out of context.
Yes.
It's just you. So and just different life experiences you're going through, walks or whatever the case may be.
And you're right, it doesn't have to be a trauma. So a lot of people haven't gone through a trauma.
You don't have to.
I think a lot of people would think, well, I don't know what to share because I've had a really great life and a really good upbringing. Well, I mean, draw on
But
the
how is that
experience.
played out then? It's like, well, you can share things like that. And it's like, because inevitably that has given you maybe secure attachment, maybe understanding what love in a family home feels like and how important that was. We don't have to share just like our pain, and like, it's not like, let's get up on, vulnerability isn't getting up on Instagram and having a cry, going like, oh my God, this is, woe is me.
Yeah.
But vulnerability is heart on sleeve, going, I'm going through this, or this is what I'm going through. So Brene Brown does this a lot better than any work that I would ever do, but she explains how vulnerability is courage and is bravery. And it is shifting over time where, like you mentioned, traditionally maybe a billboard used to work, maybe a radio ad used to work, but now because we're so content heavy and in this digital world, we're seeking realism, like real humans behind a screen, which is why TikTok as a platform was able to grow so quickly, because I mentioned it's so user generated. Here is me, I'm in my, bun hair and baggy jumper and I've got tomato sauce on me, and that kind of works. Whereas we would have been like, what the hell? Oh my goodness, if you put that on Instagram.
When I look at platforms that I enjoy spending time on, Mel, I always find myself drawn to TikTok.
Yes.
And you look at one of the biggest TikTok creators in the world, Anna Paul, who was an OnlyFans model, who's now a TikTok creator. And she's not what you would think as an OnlyFans model. But when you look at her content, it's not really about anything, but it's so relatable. She's just a girl going about her day. She's not glamorized. She's crying. She's happy. She's you're watching her relationships. You feel like she's your best friend.
Yeah.
So you believe that content that really shows it could just be the trials and tribulations of everyday life that people can relate to is really standing out in today's world.
So just on that as well, like that best friend, there's this concept in our branding and marketing world called 300 bestie hours. And what that means is the more content that you put out and someone genuinely listens to it and downloads it, every single time, even though you're having no interaction with them, if they're consuming your content over a span of 300 hours, they feel like they know you. They feel like you are their bestie. So that's where you start getting this, like when I'm out on the street, someone will be like, oh my God, Mel, can I get a photo? But that's because they feel genuinely like I've connected with you. They say, how was Bali? How was this? I'm like, oh my God. But something like long form content like this as a podcast form, you're compounding bestie hours with people that don't even know you. But it's an actual value add, because eventually that's such an intimate thing. Someone might be listening to this in their gym. Someone might be listening to this just before they go to bed, and it's Rex and Chanel's voice in their ears. Like, just think about how privileged that actually is, that you get to share that space with people that have chosen, out of all the things to consume, they've chosen to become besties with your brand. That's how I see it. When I constantly add micro moments in my day, because I'm feeding that bestie hours and that relationship, I'm actually fostering community. So I do. I think it's online, but it transfers into the real world.
It really does. I can't agree with you more. I've got so many clients the new clients, never spoken to them, don't even know they follow me, but they know everything about your life. And it's it's refreshing, it's nice. And sometimes I put stuff out there because you don't have to talk about it. Everyone knows what you're doing without you saying a word.
Yeah. What is the future of brand looking like in the incoming years, Mel? Is TikTok going to continue to be a preferred platform? What are some of the up and coming trends that you're predicting in the next few years with branding?
So I think that over the next 10 years, all of the wealth is going to be transitioned into personal brands. Let me dive deeper just into that. So if we look at the history of where things are at in terms of where wealth was created, pre-1800s, 1850s, it was all industrial. It was the rise of the government. It was the rise of the emperor, kings and queens, oil, gas, Rockefellers. And then eventually, over the next 100 or so years, was the rise of the corporations. And from around the 1900s to, I would say, even up to 2020 when COVID hit, it was the rise of the corporate. Microsoft, Apple, Telstra, all the wealth started going to these corporate entities. And then what COVID did, I don't think people recognize, COVID shook things up because everyone started working from home, and when we lost trust in corporations because people got let go. And we're in it now. This is its infancy of the rise of the individual. This is the rise of the personal brand. This is the rise of the entrepreneur. We can see that there are people that are just I don't know if you follow evidence-based training, EBT, like there are just individual faces creating massive amounts of success and wealth. Adrian Portelli is that for Australia, I think. He's changed the game of entrepreneurship. In terms of Alex Hormozi is another conversation that we talk about now in the business world. But Jack Henderson's probably one of those two, where it's the rise of the personal brand. And so I think now more than ever, we should be going out there and creating that influence and that impact, because we're trusting that the most right now. We're trusting individuals' opinions and advice over a corporate company or a traditional government body.
I think our bullshit radar is way too high these days. You can, like
Correct.
I said, you can see through it, and the regulated content put out by the
Correct.
corporation as opposed to the raw, candid
Correct.
conversations you hear from individuals. You trust the
It's
individual.
also a lack of leaders. Like, Obama was a phenomenal president. Now you've got
Did you not
Biden
watch
and
the
Trump.
presidential debate? I
Yeah,
thought
I
we've
did.
got two such exceptional options for the leadership of the most powerful country in the world. God damn, that's really terrifying. It's
It
another
is.
topic to cover later. Mel, tell us a little bit about Run It Up Media. We've got agents, directors watching this that are, really wanting to focus on their personal brands. Tell us about how Run It Up Media could potentially or could assist them.
Well, Run It Up Media is born because we recognize that people don't know what to do with their personal brands. We actually started off as a creative agency where we were providing clients content. So we gave them videos and photos and it was like, here you go, here are all your assets. What we noticed was that no one knew what to do with those assets. People didn't know how to caption, people didn't know how to write. They didn't even know how to distribute it. And what happened? You had a Dropbox or a Google Drive of all these amazing photos that never saw the day of light. And so now we've added this additional service of strategy into a brand, or like you would come and go, hey, I don't know what to do with our personal brand. We actually break that down. We go through a really deep dive kind of strategy, where you want to be positioned in the market. What are your core values? It blows my mind that some people don't even know what their core values are. And I know I'm not trying to, be cheeky or like rude about it, but as adults, we've never been taught what our core values are or what's really important to us. It's why many marriages end up in divorce, and because our values were misaligned. But if we can actually break down those values and that foundational stuff, building the brand is the easy part. Positioning you is the easy part. We actually just got to pull which levers and figure out of all of your story, what the internet and the general public would find interesting, or how we can weave it into relatability, and we go from there. So yeah, that's what we've done. It's been an agency that I've got with my co-founder, and we've literally been in it for like a quarter of a year, and it's $1 million business. And I'm not saying that, like, I'm actually just super proud of that, but
It should be.
But it's because there's a direct service and value that we're providing to people. And I'm saying, with my psychology background, with my own personal brand story, I kind of know how to do brands. And that's kind of where I really find my drive and my mission and my purpose. And that's what's getting me out of bed every day.
That is amazing. Mel, you are beyond incredible. You are a force to be reckoned with. Our agents, directors that are watching this, I think you all need a refresh on your marketing.
I'm going to be signing up myself.
No. It's the perfect time to do it, and there's no time like the present. We'll leave the details below for the information if you're interested in speaking to Mel and engaging Run It Up Media. But Mel, thank you so incredibly much.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your story as well. Wonderful. Then we'll see you on the next episode of Real Estate Renovators.